My name is Heather Wilson. I'm 29 years old, a registered nurse living in Seattle, and up until recently I thought I had a firm grasp on my life. That illusion shattered with a single, devastating phone call. "Miss Wilson, you're 3 months behind on your mortgage payments," said the voice on the other end, cool and matter-of-fact. I blinked, the words sinking in like stones in water. "What mortgage?" I asked, trying to keep the panic from my voice. "You owe $623,000, 0 cents, the bank representative continued, unfazed. My heart pounded. I don't own property. I've never taken out a mortgage. The idea was laughable, until I saw it. The paperwork, the signature, it looked exactly like mine, down to the looping H and the precise flick of the W. But it wasn't mine. I never signed those forms. And the address? It wasn't just any address. It was my sister Amanda's. Her brand new home in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Seattle. I felt the blood drain from my face. That night, we were scheduled for our bi-weekly family dinner. My stomach turned at the thought of facing everyone with what I now carried in my bag, a police report freshly filed, detailing the identity theft that would rip my family apart. I wasn't just hurt, I was betrayed. If you're watching this, wherever you are in the world, leave a comment, tell me where you're from, and stay with me as I walk you through the moment I exposed a betrayal that fractured everything I thought I knew. Before my life spiraled into chaos, it was ordinary in a way I had grown to appreciate. I'd spent 6 years working at Seattle Grace Hospital, a bustling institution known for its high standards and high pressure. My specialty was pediatric care, hard, emotionally draining, but deeply fulfilling. There's a unique kind of reward in tending to children, even when the outcomes aren't always happy. They trust you with their pain, and you fight for their healing. I wasn't the flashy type. I kept my head down, worked hard, and built a quiet reputation as the dependable one. The nurse who would cover an extra shift, who remembered birthdays, who cried with families when things didn't go right. Home was a cozy one-bedroom apartment in Ballard, modest and filled with secondhand charm. My sanctuary. I surrounded myself with greenery, plants of every shape and size. My friends teased me that I was running a jungle out of a rental, but tending to those leaves gave me solace after the long, chaotic days. My family was another pillar in my life. My parents, David and Carol, still lived in the suburban home where Amanda and I were raised. Dad had stepped away from accounting 2 years ago, embracing retirement with slow mornings and crossword puzzles. Mom, ever the teacher, still managed a classroom of energetic fourth graders. She often joked she'd retire the day kids stopped surprising her. And then, there was Amanda, my older sister by 3 years. Amanda, the golden child, confident, articulate, beautiful. She was everything I wasn't growing up. Popular, outgoing, effortlessly magnetic. I was the quiet one, bookish and socially awkward, clinging to her shadow. She was homecoming queen, debate champion, and valedictorian. I watched her shine and felt a mix of awe and gratitude. We never had an openly strained relationship, at least I never thought we did. As adults, we carved different paths. Amanda built a thriving real estate business, becoming one of the top agents for luxury properties in Seattle. She married Brian Parker, a financial advisor with a pristine smile and a love for tropical getaways. Their lives, as displayed on Instagram, were a montage of champagne brunches, charity galas, and sunset selfies on faraway beaches. They were the kind of couple that looked like they step off a travel magazine cover. I, on the other hand, was single, focused on my career. The rare date I went on was usually set up by a well-meaning coworker and ended in awkward small talk and a polite goodbye. Still, Amanda and I met regularly for coffee, and our family dinners were sacred, twice a month without fail. She'd sometimes throw in a dig disguised as advice. "You should really look into investing, Heather," she'd say. "You can't rent forever, or if you want a better place, you've got to aim higher." I brushed it off, chalking it up to her success spilling into her personality. She wanted the best for me, or so I believed. 8 months ago, Amanda and Brian moved from their sleek downtown condo into a craftsman-style house in Queen Anne, an elite area perched above the city with panoramic views of Seattle and Puget Sound. When I first walked through their new place at the housewarming party, I couldn't help but feel a pang of envy. The place was stunning. Every inch was curated, from the high-end Viking appliances in the kitchen to the imported tiles in the bathrooms. Amanda guided me from room to room like a realtor giving a tour. "All custom," she said, gesturing at the cabinetry. "We spared no expense. Someday you'll have something like this too, sis. You just have to aim higher." She squeezed my shoulder, flashing that dazzling smile. I nodded, though something inside me whispered that she was further away from me than ever. The day it all came crashing down started like any other Tuesday. I was midway through my shift, helping a sweet 7-year-old boy named Tyler change his bandages after an appendectomy. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Normally, I wouldn't answer during patient care, but my elderly neighbor had been taken to the ER the night before, and I was anxious for updates. I stepped into the hallway, glanced at the screen, and answered. "This is Heather." "Miss Wilson, this is Craig Donovan from Washington Mutual Bank. We've attempted to contact you about your mortgage. You're 3 months behind, and unless this is resolved quickly, we'll have no choice but to initiate foreclosure proceedings." I froze. "I don't have a mortgage," I said slowly. "There must be a mistake. I rent my apartment." There was a beat of silence. Then he responded, "According to our records, you took out a $623,000, 0 cents mortgage in January for a property on Highland Drive. Payments were made for 3 months, but none have been received since April." Highland Drive. I knew that name. That was Amanda Street. "There's no way," I said, my voice tightening. "I've never owned property. I'm not even eligible for a mortgage that size." "Well, Miss Wilson," he said with a hint of skepticism, "the application lists an annual income of $192,000, 0 cents, and a credit score of 782. We have all the supporting documents on file, including your signed consent." I felt sick. My actual income was less than half that, and my credit score had never breached the high 600s. This wasn't just fraud, it was personal. Someone had accessed my life, my identity. Someone who knew me well enough to forge my signature and inflate my finances convincingly. I listened in stunned disbelief as Craig listed off details of the loan, pausing only to suggest that I come into the branch after work to review the files. I agreed, hanging up with trembling hands. The hallway around me seemed to tilt. Something was deeply, horribly wrong. I walked back into Tyler's room like a ghost in my own body, my hands going through the motions of patient care while my mind spun in a whirlwind of disbelief. I smiled at him and his mother, gently checking his bandages and murmuring reassurance, but I was only half present. My thoughts were racing, colliding, trying to find some rational explanation. Clerical error? Identity theft? But the address? That address. It wasn't random. It was Amanda's. That couldn't be a coincidence. After my shift ended, I drove straight to the branch where the call had originated. I barely remembered the route, only that I arrived and was ushered into a small office by a man in his early 50s with graying temples and a firm handshake. "I'm Richard Peterson, branch manager," he said as he pulled out a thick folder and laid it on the desk between us. One by one, he flipped through the documents: the mortgage loan application, income verification, credit check authorization, closing documents. Every sheet perfectly aligned, every line filled. My name was on all of them, my forged signature scrawled neatly at the bottom of each page. The pit in my stomach deepened with every turn of the page. And then there it was, as clear as day, the address listed on the mortgage, Highland Drive. Amanda's house, her dream home, the one she'd proudly shown me not long ago. I stared at it in silence, my heart pounding in my ears. "Could I get copies of all this?" I asked. My voice sounded far away, like I was underwater. Richard hesitated, glancing at the documents. "Technically, these are your documents," he said carefully. "But given the situation, yes, I can make duplicates." He looked at me closely. "Mrs. Wilson, if you didn't sign these, then I strongly advise you to go to the police. This appears to be not just identity theft, but premeditated fraud." I nodded mechanically, but inside I was screaming. Not just any identity theft. This wasn't a faceless hacker. This wasn't some random stranger halfway across the country. This was Amanda, my sister, my blood. The days that followed were a blur, a haze of disbelief and numb motion. I couldn't bring myself to go to work. For the first time in over 2 years, I called in sick. I wasn't in any condition to care for sick children when my own life felt like it was disintegrating. My apartment, once my safe haven, felt claustrophobic. I paced endlessly between the kitchen and living room, trying to piece together an explanation. Could Amanda have made some sort of mistake, entered the wrong name on paperwork? Could it be a misunderstanding, a clerical mix-up? But no, that illusion crumbled each time I looked at the documents Richard had copied for me. These signatures weren't accidents. They were forged, meticulously, deliberately. Whoever had done this had my social security number, my date of birth, my work history. Someone who knew me inside and out. Someone who had access to my private information. My first real step was to call Equifax. The representative I spoke to sounded tired and distracted at first, like she was just moving through a script. But the moment I explained the mortgage, her tone changed. "Let me pull up your credit report, Miss Wilson," she said. I waited, tense. Then came the soft intake of breath. "There are several accounts that have been opened in your name over the past year," she said carefully. "The mortgage is the largest, But there's also a home equity line of credit for $150,000, 0 cents. 3 credit cards each with limits between $20,000, 0 cents, and $30,000, 0 cents. I felt like the floor dropped out beneath me. All of these accounts are fraudulent, I said. I didn't open any of them. I understand, ma'am. I'm placing a fraud alert on your file right now, and I'll send you instructions for disputing each account. You should also contact the other credit bureaus as soon as possible. By the end of the day, I had called all 3 major credit bureaus, filed fraud alerts, and printed out credit reports that confirmed what I feared. My one-size score of 724 had crashed to 546, dragged down by missed payments on accounts I hadn't even known existed. The following morning, still sleep-deprived and nauseated with anxiety, I met with Dion Schwartz, a financial advisor recommended by a coworker. Her office was softly lit and lined with bookshelves and plants, meant to soothe clients. But no decor could calm the storm inside me. I slid the stack of documents across her desk. She took her time reading through them, her brows knitting as she turned each page. Finally, she looked up. "This is definitely identity theft," she said, "and very sophisticated. Whoever did this knew exactly what documentation banks require and how to pass verification." I swallowed hard. "It was my sister," I said, barely above a whisper. "Amanda, that house, it's hers. She's living in it right now." Diane blinked, then sat back in her chair. "That complicates things," she said softly. "Family fraud isn't uncommon, but it's particularly hard, illegally and emotionally. Most victims hesitate to press charges. What do I do?" "You need to file a police report," she said gently. "Without that, financial institutions will treat you as a participant, not a victim. I know it's difficult, but you can't restore your financial standing otherwise." I nodded slowly, but my heart wasn't in it yet. As angry and hurt as I was, I still couldn't wrap my head around the possibility that Amanda, my big sister, my childhood protector, could do something so cold, so calculated. I needed certainty. I found a forensic handwriting expert named Marcus Bell and scheduled a consultation. He asked for multiple verified samples of my signature, from my passport, work ID, and old lease documents. Then he examined the mortgage paperwork with a magnifier and a careful hand. "These are forgeries," he said after half an hour. "Good ones, but forged. See this? There's hesitation in the pen pressure, right here in the H and again in the tail of the W. They weren't writing naturally, they were copying, mimicking." "Could you testify to that?" I asked. "I'd need to conduct a formal analysis, but based on this preliminary review, yes." I thanked him, both relieved and devastated. It was the confirmation I needed, but it didn't make the betrayal any easier to swallow. Determined to learn more, I started digging into Amanda's financial situation. I had no legal access to her records, but I scoured social media and spoke to mutual friends, threading together clues. Despite the glamorous exterior of the boat, the country club, the new Mercedes, things weren't as stable as they appeared. Her real estate business had taken a hit in the last couple of years, with the market slowing. Brian, once a high-flying advisor, had left his firm under mysterious circumstances. No one would say why, only that it wasn't amicable. His new solo venture hadn't taken off, and yet their lifestyle had only grown more extravagant. The final piece of the puzzle came from my friend Stephanie, who worked at a luxury car dealership where Amanda had recently bought her latest car. "We probably shouldn't be talking about this," she said as we sat in a quiet cafe. But when Amanda came in to finance her new Mercedes, her credit was trashed. Total mess. Brian had to cover the entire payment in cash. I sat there in silence, processing it all. The borrowed dreams, the mounting lies. My sister hadn't just used my name, she'd built a castle on top of it. A few days after my meeting with the financial advisor, I overheard something I wasn't supposed to. I had gone to drop off a package at the courier center when I spotted Amanda and Brian in the parking lot. They didn't see me. They were deep in conversation, more like an argument, really. Their voices were low but urgent, and as I approached my car, I caught a snippet that made my blood run cold. "We can't keep doing this," Brian hissed. "The house was risky enough." That was all I heard before I quickly ducked behind a parked SUV, my heart racing. My house, according to the bank, the one with my name on the mortgage, so it wasn't just Amanda. Brian knew too. They were both in on it. Back home, I discovered even more disturbing details. Multiple credit accounts had been opened under my name, each linked to online statements, but the contact email wasn't mine. It was nearly identical but slightly off. heatherwilson883@gmail.com instead of my real address, heatherwilson1993@gmail.com. It was subtle, easy to miss in verification steps, but clearly intentional. That kind of deception didn't happen by accident. Every new discovery felt like a boulder pressing on my chest, making it harder to breathe, harder to cling to denial. My sister, the person I trusted more than anyone, had used my identity to fund a lavish life she couldn't afford. She didn't just borrow my name, she exploited it, sacrificed my financial future without a second thought. She left me buried in legal chaos and insurmountable debt, assuming I'd never find out or wouldn't have the courage to fight back. But I couldn't keep avoiding the truth. A week after my investigation began, I knew I had no choice. I needed to make it official. My heart heavy with dread, I drove to the Seattle Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. It was tucked inside a dull municipal building with cracked linoleum floors and humming fluorescent lights, a far cry from the dramatized precincts on television. I checked in at the front desk, handed over my driver's license, and was told to wait. I sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair for nearly an hour, clutching a manila folder filled with bank statements, forged documents, and credit reports that now told the story of my stolen identity. When a woman finally appeared and called my name, I stood on shaky legs. "Heather Wilson?" she asked. She looked to be in her 40s, with short brown hair, sharp eyes, and the weary expression of someone who'd seen too much. "I'm Detective Rachel Thompson. Sorry about the wait. Come with me." She led me down a hallway into a small interview room, its only furnishings a plain table and 3 mismatched chairs. A security camera was mounted in one corner. She noticed my glance. "Your standard protocol," she said with a faint smile. "It protects both you and us." I nodded, sinking into one of the chairs as she pulled out a legal pad. "Now, I understand you're here to report identity theft?" "Yes," I said, my voice smaller than I expected. "By my sister." Her eyebrows twitched slightly. Whether it was surprise or recognition, I wasn't sure, but her professional tone didn't waver. "That's unfortunately more common than most people think," she said. "Tell me everything from the beginning." For the next 2 hours, I recounted everything, starting with the call from the bank, the trip to the branch, the mountain of forged paperwork, the unraveling credit history, and the house registered in my name. I described Amanda's access to my apartment, her knowledge of my personal information, and the evidence I had collected. Detective Thompson was thorough. She asked about timelines, whether Amanda had ever lived with me as an adult, no. Whether we shared financial accounts, no. Or if I'd ever shared sensitive information directly with her, not knowingly. "She's been to my apartment countless times," I admitted. "I had all my important documents in a file cabinet in my home office. It wasn't locked. I never thought I needed to protect myself from my own sister." Her gaze softened. "Most people don't. No one expects this from family. It's not your fault." When I finally finished, she sat back and took a breath. "Miss Wilson, I want you to understand something. If we proceed with this report and our investigation finds enough evidence to support your claims, your sister could be facing serious criminal charges. Identity theft, mortgage fraud, these are felonies. She could go to prison. Are you prepared for that outcome?" The question hit me like a freight train. Was I ready to see Amanda behind bars? Was I willing to be the one who set that in motion? My mind flashed back to childhood memories. Amanda teaching me to ride my bike without training wheels, slipping me notes of encouragement during finals week, shielding me from cruel girls in middle school. I thought about how she hugged me when our grandmother died, how proud our parents always were of her. But then I remembered the sleepless nights, the mounting dread, the trashed credit score, and the staggering $623,000, 0 cents debt now hanging over me like a noose. I remembered the callousness with which she'd used my identity, not for survival but for luxury. And I remembered how she let me walk blindly into the aftermath. "Yes," I said, voice steady now. "I have to protect myself. If she faces consequences, that's on her, not me." Detective Thompson nodded. "Understood. We'll handle this investigation with care, but I want to be honest. If we file charges, it becomes public record. Confidentiality isn't something we can guarantee." "I understand." She pushed a form across the table toward me. "This is the official identity theft report. Read through it carefully before signing." I did, and then I signed it with my real signature, clean, deliberate, not the fabricated one that had been used to sign my life away. A strange wave of emotions washed over me. Relief, yes, but also sadness. Finality. The wheels of justice had started to turn, and I knew there would be no stopping them now. Stephanie was waiting in the lobby. I had asked her to come for support, and the sight of her warm smile almost undid me. She stood and wrapped me in a hug. "How did it go?" she asked softly. I tried to muster a smile. About as well as accusing your sister of felony fraud can go, I said, my voice catching despite the joke. She pulled back and looked at me. You did the right thing, Heather. What she did was unforgivable. We walked to a nearby coffee shop. I sat in a daze as Stephanie listened patiently while I poured out my tangled feelings. I told her what the detective said, about subpoenas and bank records, about how Amanda might be interviewed soon. How do you think she'll react? Stephanie asked. I stared down at the untouched latte in front of me. She'll deny it. She's good at that, pretending, deflecting. Then she'll say she meant to pay it back, that she was doing it for us, or for the family. She'll make it sound noble somehow. Do you think she really planned to pay it back? Stephanie asked gently. I shook my head, maybe in some idealistic way, but the truth is, they were already defaulting. There was no plan, just panic and greed. They were using me to stay afloat. 2 days later, the investigation began. Detective Thompson's voice was steady on the phone, but every word she spoke sent fresh tremors through my already frayed nerves. Ms. Wilson, she began, we've confirmed your suspicions. The mortgage application was submitted online using your personal information, but the IP address it originated from traces back to your sister's former residence. I sat in stunned silence as she continued, each revelation striking like a hammer. We're also looking into the potential involvement of her husband, Brian. Financial crimes of this magnitude are rarely executed alone, especially within a household. Based on what we're seeing, it's likely he was a part of it too. Brian, of course. It was absurd I hadn't considered him more carefully before. As a financial advisor, he would have known exactly how to navigate systems, how to appear legitimate. In fact, with his professional knowledge, it was possible that he had designed the entire scheme. Amanda may have been the executor, but he could easily have been the architect. There's more, Detective Thompson said, her tone darkening. We discovered browser history and saved documents indicating they were preparing to declare bankruptcy in your name once the debt became unsustainable. Searches for Washington bankruptcy laws, discharge timelines, and even forums discussing identity abandonment came from their home network. It wasn't just reckless borrowing, it wasn't a moment of desperation. It was calculated annihilation. They had strategized not only how to defraud me, but how to walk away from it unscathed, leaving me to pick up the financial rubble. A week after filing my report, I received an official police packet, neatly bound, stamped with case numbers, and marked confidential. It was a damning compilation of evidence. Bank statements showing transfers from fraudulent accounts to Amanda and Brian's personal ones, applications for loans and lines of credit filled out using my name and forged signature, credit card purchases made at luxury stores and fine dining establishments I'd never even heard of, charges for designer handbags, private tennis lessons, spa retreats, and high-spend electronics, things I couldn't dream of affording on my real salary. I sat at my kitchen table late into the night, highlighting lines and scribbling notes. The police had built a thorough case, so detailed, so airtight it left no room for misinterpretation. According to Detective Thompson, the district attorney was optimistic and preparing to file formal charges by the end of the week. And tomorrow was family dinner. Amanda would be there, laughing and glowing as if nothing had happened, as if her carefully orchestrated deception wasn't about to come crashing down around her. She still believed she'd gotten away with it. She had no idea I'd received the foreclosure notice intended for homeowner Heather Wilson. She didn't know I'd uncovered her lies. She didn't know the truth now lived in a manila folder on my kitchen counter, awaiting exposure. That evening, just as I was preparing for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Looking forward to seeing my girls tomorrow. I'm making your favorite lasagna. Love you both. The simplicity and warmth of her message, so painfully ordinary, broke me. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, I cried. Not just tears, but heavy sobs that racked my body. I cried for the betrayal, for the years of trust Amanda had shattered, but mostly, I cried for my parents. They had raised us to be loyal, to protect each other, to do the right thing, and tomorrow, their world would be cracked open. I spent the morning rehearsing what I would say. I didn't want drama, no yelling, no screaming, though I had every reason. I wanted Amanda to see calm, undeniable truth. I wanted her to see the person she'd underestimated. I would show her the report, lay it all bare. She could deny it if she dared, but the evidence would speak louder than any excuses she could conjure. Just before I began getting dressed, my phone rang again. "Honey, you're still coming tonight, right?" Mom asked, cheerfully unaware of the storm about to hit. "Your father already opened a bottle of that Oregon P&O you like." "I'll be there at 6, I replied. "Good. Amanda's bringing that chocolate mousse cake you love from Dahlia Bakery. Isn't that thoughtful?" Thoughtful. My sister, the identity thief, buying me a cake using credit stolen in my name. The irony twisted in my gut. Very thoughtful, I managed, biting back the bitterness. See you soon. I carefully tucked the police folder into my purse, its weight a reminder of the truth I carried. I stood in front of my closet for a long time, struggling with the absurdity of the decision, what to wear to a dinner where I would blow my family apart. I finally settled on a navy dress, understated but professional. No frills, no weakness, not my usual jeans and sweater combo for family dinners. Tonight demanded something else. My makeup was precise, almost clinical. I made sure I looked calm, composed. I would not allow Amanda to see how deeply she had wounded me. That power was no longer hers to wield. Driving to Bellevue was like traveling through memory. As the familiar streets passed by, I was flooded with recollections of happier times. Dad singing drunken carols on Christmas Eve, Amanda and I whispering childhood secrets while helping Mom in the kitchen, birthday cakes and board games and all the tiny, glittering moments that made us feel safe and whole. Tonight would be the last night our family existed as we had known it. I parked a block away and sat in the car for a few minutes, willing my nerves to settle. I could still choose to walk away, say nothing, handle this privately, give Amanda a chance to explain herself without our parents watching. But then I remembered the searches, the bankruptcy plan, the callous way she had planned to ruin me completely. There would be no mercy. As I walked toward the house, I saw Amanda's white Range Rover gleaming in the driveway. She'd told me once it was a reward to herself for closing a record-breaking sale. But was that just another lie? Had that car too been paid for with money tied to my name? The scent of Mom's homemade lasagna wafted through the open windows. I stood at the front door for a moment, breathing it in, grounding myself. Then I rang the bell, the weight of the folder dragging at my shoulder like a stone. Mom opened the door, radiant as ever. "Heather, you look beautiful, but serious. Everything okay at the hospital?" I smiled faintly. "Just a long week, Mom. I'm fine." She pulled me into a hug, warm and familiar. Inside, Dad raised his glass from the recliner, grinning. "There's my girl. Pinot?" "Yes, please," I said, grateful for the offer. And then Amanda appeared. Her laugh, light and musical, drifted in from the kitchen. She stepped into view wearing tailored cream slacks and an elegant silk blouse. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her smile dazzling, as always. "Heather," she said, her tone cheerful and affectionate. Finally. Finally, indeed. She had no idea that I was about to ruin her evening and expose everything. Amanda leaned back in her chair, sipping wine and regaling Mom with some polished anecdote about an inspiring patient recovery story she'd heard from Dr. Garner at the country club. "You should really talk to him, Heather," she said, her tone overly casual. "He's expanding his private practice. The benefits are incredible. I could set something up for you." The sheer audacity of it almost made me choke on my water. Here she was, my sister, who had stolen my identity, racked up hundreds of thousands in debt under my name, offering me career advice as though she were still the protective big sister I once idolized, as if she had my best interests at heart. I managed a tight smile. "I'm happy where I am, thanks." If she noticed the iciness in my voice, she didn't let on. Amanda had always been adept at ignoring uncomfortable truths. From the patio, laughter floated in from Dad and Brian. Apparently Brian was helping with the grill. Mom, in her usual enthusiastic way, had decided that lasagna alone wasn't enough and insisted on steaks too. "We're going to be eating leftovers for days," she joked, bustling back into the kitchen. Not long after, the doorbell rang, and my brother Mark arrived with his wife Jessica and their 2 children. Jessica, ever observant and enthusiastic, commented almost immediately on Amanda's house. "That sunroom is absolutely gorgeous," she gushed. "I stopped by with the kids last week for a playdate. Amanda, the way the light spills in during the afternoon, it's perfect for plants. Heather, with your green thumb, you'd be obsessed." Amanda glanced at me quickly, a flash of something unspoken in her eyes, before smoothly replying, "Oh, we're still working on that space. The renovation's been dragging. Contractors, you know how it is." I bit the inside of my cheek. That sunroom, like every other part of the house, had been bought with my stolen credit. It was more than a sunroom. It was evidence of betrayal. Every beautiful tile and custom window had my name attached to it in the bank's ledger. Dinner unfolded with almost surreal normalcy. Dad carved the steaks while Mom served thick, cheesy portions of lasagna. Wine flowed freely and conversation meandered through Mark's architectural projects, the kids' latest soccer goals, and upcoming holidays. Amanda expertly steered conversations away from anything remotely financial. She deflected questions about the house, never letting them linger, always turning the spotlight on someone else. Heather, you're awfully quiet tonight, Dad noted as we cleared our plates. Rough week, I said, setting down my fork carefully. Want to talk about it? Mom asked, her forehead knitting with concern. Before I could answer, Amanda jumped in. Oh, leave her be, Mom, she said with a laugh, flipping her hair like we were still in high school. Not everyone's like me, oversharing all the time. Some people need to process things privately. I almost laughed. Amanda, the woman who had secretly ruined my finances and would soon be the subject of a very public criminal investigation, advocating for privacy. The irony was suffocating. Actually, I said, turning my gaze directly to her, there is something I need to talk about, with all of you. Her confident smile twitched ever so slightly. Sounds serious, she said lightly. Can it wait until dessert? I brought that mousse cake from Dahlia, Heather, your favorite. That can wait, I replied, my voice even but firm. The room stilled. Even the children seemed to sense the shift, their chatter softening into silence. Mom's eyes darted to Mark. Why don't you take the kids into the living room, she said gently. They've been promised screen time, haven't they? Mark nodded and ushered the children away with the promise of cartoons. Once they were gone, I reached slowly into my bag and pulled out the manila folder. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I was painfully aware of every sound, the creak of my chair, the soft clink of a wine glass being set down. Amanda's eyes followed the folder's movement. Her smile wavered. What's that, honey? Dad asked, his tone cautious. I placed the folder on the table, laying a hand on top of it. This is a police report, I said. The air seemed to evaporate from the room. My mother's eyes widened. Dad leaned forward, wine glass suspended mid-air. Brian, who had been mostly quiet, suddenly straightened in his seat, eyes flicking from the folder to Amanda. Police report, Mom echoed. Heather, what's going on? Are you okay? No, Mom, I said softly but firmly. I'm not okay. I'm the victim of a crime. I looked straight at Amanda as I pushed the folder toward her. Identity theft and fraud, to be specific. Amanda didn't move. Her expression was eerily still. The confident mask she wore was cracking, the corners fraying. What are you talking about? She asked, voice unnaturally high and brittle. Open it, I said quietly. Brian reached out and touched her arm. Maybe we should discuss this in private, he murmured. There's nothing to discuss, Amanda snapped, still not touching the folder. Heather's clearly confused. My father, who had always hated drama, attempted a nervous chuckle. Girls, is this some kind of misunderstanding? Because I'm not following. It's not a joke, Dad, I said, and with steady hands I flipped open the folder myself. The first page bore the official seal of the Seattle Police Department, complete with case number and Detective Rachel Thompson's signature. 2 weeks ago, I began. I received a call from Washington Mutual Bank. They wanted to know why I'd stopped paying my mortgage on a $623,000 0-cents loan I never took out, for a house I've never lived in, at 4872 Highland Drive. My mother gasped. But that's Amanda and Brian's address. I nodded. The house they've been living in for months? The one they've been giving tours of and bragging about on social media? It was purchased using a mortgage taken out in my name. Using my credit, along with a home equity line of credit, 3 high-limit credit cards and a personal loan. All maxed out, all in default. Everyone stared at Amanda. Her complexion had gone ghostly pale, her mouth opened but no words came. Then she gave a short, hollow laugh. This is insane. Obviously some bank mix-up, these things happen, identity theft is rampant. The police don't think so, I interrupted. Neither does the handwriting expert who analyzed the mortgage documents, and neither does the IP address which traces back to your old condo. You and Brian orchestrated this. Brian suddenly stood up, his face flushed, his chair scraped harshly against the floor. And just like that, the facade Amanda had so carefully constructed began to collapse. We should go, Amanda. We don't have to listen to this, Brian said sharply, rising from his seat. But before either of them could make a move, my father's voice rang out, deep, trembling, and laced with a fury I'd never heard before. Sit down, Brian, both of you. You're going to explain exactly what the hell is going on. Amanda flinched slightly at the tone, her mask of composure momentarily slipping. But then, in a flash, the wide-eyed innocence vanished. She straightened her spine and folded her hands on the table. The air around her seemed to grow colder. Fine, she said, her voice hard. You want the truth? We hit a rough patch. Brian's firm collapsed when his partner embezzled half their accounts. My commissions dried up during the market downturn. We were drowning. Everything we worked for gone in months. So you decided to solve your financial crisis by stealing my identity, I said, barely able to contain my disbelief. You thought it was acceptable to burden me with over $800,000, 0 cents in fraudulent debt. Amanda's voice rose slightly, defensive. It was supposed to be temporary. Once the market recovered and Brian's new clients started rolling in, we planned to refinance everything in our own names. You were never going to be responsible long-term. That's a lie, I said quietly but firmly. The police found your internet searches, Amanda, from your own IP address. You were looking into how to declare bankruptcy under my name. There was never any plan to fix this. You intended to wipe your debt clean and leave me in ruins. My mother's sobs broke the silence, quiet and trembling. Her hands clutched her napkin as if it could hold her together. My father's face was a deep, dangerous red. His hands were clenched into fists on the table. Tell me this isn't true, Amanda, he said, his voice now low and deadly calm. Tell me you didn't do this to your sister, to us. Amanda looked ready to deny it again, but something in her finally gave way. Her shoulders sagged, and she exhaled shakily. We were desperate, she said, almost to herself. You can't understand what it's like, to have achieved a certain status, a lifestyle everyone expects you to maintain, and then to feel it slipping away. People looked up to us, clients, friends, our community. We couldn't let it all fall apart. I was looking up to you, I said, my voice cracking. I was counting on you to be my sister, someone who loved me, someone who would never ever do this. Suddenly, Brian turned on her, his face twisted in anger. I told you this would blow up in our faces, he snapped. I told you we should have found another way. There was no other way, Amanda shouted back, all pretense gone. Your brilliant investment strategies lost us everything. What was I supposed to do, just watch it all burn? How about not commit felony fraud using your own sister's identity, Brian shot back. Do you even understand what this means? We're going to prison, Amanda. You've ruined us. Their argument echoed through the house like a thunderstorm. My parents sat in stunned silence, their expressions hollow. Then, with a sudden force that silenced the room, my father stood. Get out, he said, voice low and hoarse. Both of you, get out of my house. Dad, please, Amanda began, eyes filling with tears. Whether they were real or performative, I couldn't tell anymore. I understand perfectly, he said, cutting her off. You stole from your sister. You lied to every single one of us. You were willing to destroy Heather's future just to preserve your own illusion of success. I don't know who you are anymore. My mother looked at Amanda, still crying. After everything we taught you, about honesty, about loyalty, how could you do this to your own family? Amanda stared back with a flicker of defiance. Nothing happened to me, she said, her voice regaining a cold edge. I just refused to fail. Unlike the rest of this family, I have ambition. You think I wanted to end up like Heather, living in a one-bedroom apartment surrounded by plants? Her words hit me like a slap. The cruelty of it, so casual, so deliberate, left me momentarily speechless. That's what you think of me? I asked quietly. That I'm some kind of failure because I don't have granite countertops or drive a luxury car? You could have had more, Amanda said bitterly. You're smart, but you've always been content with scraps. Honestly, it's not like you were even using your great credit score for anything important. Before I could respond, Brian grabbed her arm. Enough, Amanda, we're leaving. He turned to me, his face a mixture of fury and fear. You have no idea what you've done by filing that report. Oh, but I do, I said calmly. I've protected myself from criminals. That's exactly what you both are, and now you'll face the consequences. As they moved to leave, Mom stood. The police, she said through her tears. Will they arrest you? Amanda paused at the doorway. Her mask slipped. For a split second, I saw something real in her. Fear. I don't know, she said softly. Probably. And then they were gone. The silence that followed was deafening. My father poured himself another glass of wine, his hands trembling. My mother looked at her plate but didn't touch it. I should have seen it, she murmured after a long pause. All those things they were buying, the house, the car, we knew they couldn't afford any of it. I just thought they were reckless, not criminals. No one saw this coming, I said, reaching for her hand. I never imagined Amanda, my own sister, was capable of something like this. Not to anyone, and certainly not to me. My father looked at the open police report on the table, the official document that had triggered this confrontation. What happens now? The district attorney will decide whether to press charges, I said. Detective Thompson believes it's almost inevitable. The evidence is too strong to ignore. Arrests could happen within a week. And the debts? He asked, still thinking like an accountant. I'm working with the banks. The police report helps prove I was a victim, not a participant. But my credit, it's still ruined. For now. We sat there, surrounded by half-eaten food and shattered illusions, trying to process the enormity of what had just happened. Mark returned from the living room, his expression puzzled until he saw our faces. "What happened?" he asked, looking from one silent figure to the next. I told him everything. At first, he didn't believe me. His mouth opened and closed like he was searching for a different version of the story. But as I laid out the facts, showed him the folder, explained the forged documents, his disbelief curdled into anger. "I'll testify if you need me to," he said fiercely. "What she did to you, it's unforgivable." When I finally drove home that night, the city lights blurred through the windshield. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than necessary. I had done what I needed to do. I had chosen truth, chosen justice. But as I pulled into my parking spot and looked at the dim glow of my apartment windows, I felt hollow, as if something vital had been scooped from inside me and discarded. I had saved myself, but I had lost my sister. I once believed I understood my family, our bonds, our boundaries, but nothing prepares you for the day that understanding shatters. In the days following that fateful dinner, it felt as if I were watching someone else's life unfold. Scenes blurred together like an overacted television drama, only this time I was the unwilling protagonist. 3 days after the confrontation, I received a call from Detective Thompson. Her tone was professional but somber. "Mrs. Wilson," she said, "I'm calling to inform you that arrest warrants have been issued for Amanda Parker and Brian Parker." My heart clenched. Despite everything, a part of me had hoped it wouldn't come to this. "They were taken into custody early this morning," she continued, "at their residence on Highland Drive. They've been charged with multiple felonies: identity theft, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. The home they were arrested in, my name was still on the fraudulent mortgage paperwork. That house, so proudly paraded on social media, had become a crime scene." By that afternoon, the news broke. "Prominent Seattle realtor and financial advisor charged in identity theft scheme," read the headlines. The accompanying article didn't list my name, but it mentioned the victim was Amanda's sister. Anyone who knew us, even casually, could easily piece it together. My phone exploded with messages. Old friends, distant relatives, former classmates. Most were sympathetic, some were invasive. "How are you holding up? Did you know what they were doing? Are they going to jail?" I silenced my phone and left it in a drawer. My parents, too, were reeling. My father stopped attending his Tuesday golf games. The man who once eagerly discussed retirement investments with neighbors now couldn't look them in the eye. My mother, always the epitome of warmth and polish, took a sudden leave from her 4th-grade classroom, citing medical stress. She stopped wearing makeup, stopped styling her hair. "Everyone must be talking about us," she said one evening, her voice hollow. "I keep wondering where we went wrong with Amanda." "You didn't go wrong," I tried to reassure her, though a part of me harbored the same question. Had we all missed something over the years? Little signs, white lies that grew darker with time? "Your father blames himself," she whispered, clutching a tissue. "He thinks he should have taught her better values." But it wasn't about values, it was about choices. Amanda had made hers. Then came the pressure, quiet at first. Hinted suggestions from my mother during phone calls. "She made a terrible mistake," she said one evening, voice trembling, "but she's still your sister, still our daughter." "I know," I replied. Maybe you could speak to the district attorney, ask if there's a way to reduce the charges, probation maybe, instead of prison." I was quiet for a long time. "Mom," I said finally, "Amanda stole my identity. She tried to declare bankruptcy in my name. If she'd succeeded, I'd have lost my apartment, my job. I wouldn't have even qualified for a car loan. She planned to destroy my life, Mom." "I know," she said, crying softly. "What she did was inexcusable. But she has 2 children, Harper and Ethan, 5 and 7. They don't deserve to grow up without their mother." And that was the part that tore at me. Those children, innocent, bright-eyed, trusting. I'd babysat them, taken them to the zoo, watched cartoons with them. They didn't ask for any of this. For a moment, my resolve faltered. I started to wonder, could I ask the DA about a plea? Was there a way for Amanda to pay restitution without prison? Could I somehow prevent the damage from spreading to the kids? Stephanie Blunt, unwavering Stephanie, dragged me out for a drink that Friday. A small dive bar in Capitol Hill, far from anyone who might recognize me. Over the rim of her vodka tonic, she said flatly, "You need to stop blaming yourself for her choices." "I'm not." "Yes, you are," she interrupted. "Amanda chose to commit crimes. Amanda chose to target her own sister. Amanda risked everything, including her own kids, when she forged your signature. None of that is on you. My parents are doing what parents do, she said, trying to protect their child, but they're protecting the wrong one. You're the victim here, Heather. Stop letting them twist that around. She was right. Deep down, I knew it. When I met with the district attorney the following week, I made my decision clear. I'm not interested in reducing the charges, I told Prosecutor Natalie Chin. She nodded solemnly. Mrs. Wilson, I want to commend your courage. Many identity theft cases involving family members never go to trial. Victims withdraw under pressure, but these crimes have real consequences. They deserve real accountability. The legal process was grueling. Hearings, motions, delays. Amanda and Brian's lawyers, hired at great expense, fought to delay the inevitable. Meanwhile, I still had bills to pay, patients to care for, a credit score to slowly rebuild. Life didn't stop just because mine had been upended. 9 months after the confrontation, Amanda and Brian finally accepted a plea deal. I arrived at the courthouse early that day. I sat in the gallery, hands clenched, as the proceedings began. Amanda entered quietly, looking thinner, paler. Her hair was pulled back in a simple braid, no more luxury heels or designer handbags, just a modest navy suit. Her eyes flickered across the courtroom and landed on me. Ms. Amanda Parker, the judge said, voice firm and clear. You have pleaded guilty to 1 count of identity theft, 1 count of fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy. Before I proceed with sentencing, do you wish to make a statement? Amanda nodded. She turned slightly toward me. For a moment, she looked like the sister I once adorned. Human, small, not the manipulative stranger from recent months. I want to apologize to my sister, she said. Her voice was low but steady. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed your trust in the worst way imaginable, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. She paused, swallowing. I was selfish. I was scared of failing, but none of that excuses what I did. I hurt the person who always believed in me, who always supported me, and I can never take that back. Her eyes shone with unshed tears. For the first time in months, I believed she meant it. But her remorse couldn't undo what had been done. I'm so sorry, Heather. Those were Amanda's final words to me in the courtroom, her voice barely audible as the judge delivered the sentence. She stood pale and subdued, her expression empty but for the faintest glint of resignation. The court had handed down its verdict. Amanda would serve 18 months in federal prison. Brian received 12 months. Both were to complete 3 years of supervised release afterward and repay full restitution for the damages. How they would manage that without their careers remained a mystery. Amanda's real estate license had already been revoked, and Brian had been stripped of his financial advisory credentials. Their professional lives, once the pillars of their identity, had crumbled to dust. As the bailiffs led Amanda out of the courtroom, she turned and locked eyes with me. It was only for a moment, but it felt like an eternity. There was so much emotion buried in that glance. Regret, sorrow, fear, and maybe something deeper. So much left unspoken. So much damage done. In that instant, I wasn't sure whether I hated her or mourned her. The weeks that followed blurred together in a haze of logistics and emotional exhaustion. The bank foreclosed on the Highland Drive property, selling it at auction for a fraction of the original mortgage. I spent long hours on the phone with credit bureaus and financial institutions, sending notarized letters, faxing police reports, submitting official affidavits. Slowly, painfully, the fraudulent accounts began to vanish from my record, though not without leaving scars. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents strained under the weight of our shared grief. They visited Amanda regularly at the minimum security prison where she served her sentence. They spoke little about these visits when they spoke to me at all. Our conversations became stiff, strained. We danced around the trauma like dancers avoiding shattered glass. Thanksgiving passed without the warmth and noise that had once filled our dining room. My parents invited me, but I declined. Instead, I accepted an invitation from Stephanie's family, where I was welcomed without judgment. Christmas followed in much the same way. I delivered gifts to my parents' porch, rang the bell, and left before the door opened. The rituals that had once grounded us, turkey carving, exchanging ornaments, reading old cards, had grumbled alongside our trust. One day, in early spring, I received word from the final lender. The fraudulent mortgage that had haunted my credit report for over a year had been fully removed. I stared at the email confirmation for a long time, numb. This should have felt like a victory, but instead, it felt like surfacing after being submerged too long, gasping, sputtering, blinking in unfamiliar light. My credit score had begun to crawl upward, still far from its former strength, but recovering, slowly. I moved to a new apartment. A one-bedroom unit in a modern building with secure access, video surveillance, and most importantly, a locked mailbox only I could open. It wasn't as spacious as my previous place, but it was clean, safe, and most importantly, mine. The paranoia lingered. Every unfamiliar charge, every odd email, every unexpected mailer triggered a rush of panic. But I was learning to manage it. I carried it like a backpack, heavy but not incapacitating. Weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Elaine Winters became my anchor. At first I was hesitant, skeptical of opening up to yet another stranger, but she was gentle, steady, and disarmingly practical. In her softly lit office I found a space to unravel everything I couldn't say to anyone else. Family betrayal, she told me during one of our early sessions, is its own unique trauma. The people we believe should protect us become the source of harm. That challenges our very understanding of trust. Will I ever trust anyone again? I had asked her once. You will, she said simply, but differently. It wasn't Amanda who broke through my emotional barricade, it was Harper. One sunny March afternoon, a pink envelope appeared in my mailbox, addressed in wobbly pencil lettering. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a folded sheet of paper covered in drawings of hearts and flowers. Written in blocky handwriting were the words, "Dear Aunt Heather, I miss you a lot. Grandma says you're mad at Mommy because she did something bad. I'm sometimes mad at Mommy too, like when she says no to 2 desserts. But I still love her. Do you still love her? Can you come see me and Ethan? We live in a new apartment now, but it's small and doesn't have a garden like the big house. Love." The letter brought tears that no court ruling, no therapy session had managed to release. It wasn't the content so much as the innocence behind it. Harper didn't understand the magnitude of what had happened. How could she? She only knew that her family was broken and that someone she loved was missing. She and Ethan were innocent victims of their parents' choices, and despite everything, I loved them. That night, I called my parents. "Can I see the kids?" I asked. The relief in my mother's voice was immediate and overwhelming. "They ask about you all the time," she said. "We've been caring for them since Amanda and Brian left. They would be so happy to see you." That weekend, I visited. Harper and Ethan greeted me with squeals and tight hugs, dragging me inside to show me their new bunk beds and a wall of drawings taped to the living room wall. We made cookies, we played board games. I listened to them giggle as they told stories about their classmates. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was healing, a beginning. That same week, I drove past the Highland Drive house. The for sale sign had finally come down. A moving truck was parked in the driveway, and a new family bustled about, unloading boxes. A boy rode a scooter up and down the sidewalk. Laughter floated through the spring air. I felt nothing, no longing, no resentment, just closure. That house no longer symbolized betrayal. It was just a house again, a place for someone else to fill with memories. 6 months into Amanda's sentence, my life had begun to rebuild, not to what it was, but to something quieter, steadier. My credit score had returned to the fair range. Most of the fraudulent accounts were gone, though a few lingering notes would require future explanations. I had created new habits. Locking every drawer, shredding every bill, checking every bank statement 3 times. The hypervigilance was exhausting, but necessary. And every week, I sat in Dr. Winters' office, shedding another layer of shame, fear, or anger. It would be a long road, but it was mine to walk. I remembered asking her once, half in jest but half in desperate hope, "Do you think I'll ever trust again?" "You'll trust differently," Dr. Winters had replied with measured care, more intentionally. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. She had been right. I no longer gave my trust away easily, the way I once did without a second thought. Now, I was deliberate with my disclosures, cautious with whom I let into my world. I checked my credit report regularly, reviewed every bank transaction down to the cent, and stored my important documents in a locking cabinet bolted to the floor of my modest apartment. But I hadn't shut down completely. That had been my greatest fear in those early, harrowing days. That this betrayal would harden me beyond recognition, turn me into someone closed off, brittle, incapable of connection. Instead, what had emerged was someone wiser, someone who had learned that boundaries were not walls and vigilance didn't have to mean isolation. My relationship with my parents had begun, slowly and cautiously, to mend. We would never go back to the ease and innocence of our old dynamic, but there was effort on both sides. We were trying. There was a shared understanding that certain subjects were too painful to probe, too raw to lay bare over meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Sunday dinners resumed, though less often and without the former spontaneity. Conversation was lighter, punctuated by safe topics. My father's vegetable garden, my mother's latest book club selection. whether Harper had lost her front tooth yet. During one such dinner, as we cleared plates and refilled coffee mugs, my mother ventured carefully into forbidden territory. "Your father and I visited Amanda yesterday." I paused, my fork hovering over a slice of pie. "Oh," I managed, surprised by the genuine curiosity in my voice. "She's managing," my mother said, glancing at me like a diver checking the depth of water before diving in. "Teaching an ESL class to the other inmates. She asked about you." I nodded but offered no further response. I still wasn't ready. Not to visit Amanda, not to hear apologies across a cold metal table, not to revisit that wound in her presence. Maybe someday, but not yet. To my astonishment, it was my father who spoke next, his voice quiet but clear. "She's different in there, humbled. I think she's finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what she did to you." It was the first time he had directly acknowledged me as the victim, not as a collateral figure in Amanda's spiral, not simply the other daughter, but the person who had been betrayed, who had lost so much. "Thank you for saying that, Dad," I whispered, emotions tightening in my throat. In the weeks that followed, support came from unexpected places. My cousin Rachel, whom I had always known more as a polite acquaintance than a confidant, invited me for coffee and shared something she had never told our family. "My college roommate stole my identity," she confessed, "ran up credit cards in my name. I pressed charges, lost friends who said I was making a big deal out of nothing. But I've never regretted it, not for a second." She was the first person, outside my therapist, who truly understood. Her words gave me permission to stop explaining, justifying, rationalizing. I wasn't overreacting. I was reacting appropriately to being violated in a deeply personal way. Soon, I found an online support group for identity theft survivors. What began as anonymous posts and late-night reading evolved into something more. In-person meetings of a financial crime survivors network. There, in a small community center off Pike Street, I met people whose stories mirrored my own. The disbelief, the shame, the painstaking process of rebuilding credit, trust, and identity itself. In their company, I found something profound, understanding without the need for explanation. One evening after a meeting, a woman named Margot approached me. She was the director of a nonprofit that helped identity theft victims navigate the daunting world of legal recovery, credit restoration, and emotional support. "You have a real gift for this," she said after watching me guide a new member through the steps of disputing a fraudulent auto loan. "You're direct but kind. You don't sugarcoat, but you make them feel seen." With Margot's encouragement, I began volunteering. I conducted intake interviews, led informational workshops, and offered guidance based on what I'd lived through. For the first time since Amanda's betrayal, I felt my pain morph into something productive, something useful. I couldn't undo what had happened, but I could help someone else walk through the wreckage with a flashlight in hand. Back home, I settled into my apartment. The lease on my old place had ended, and financially, I needed something more manageable after the legal costs and counseling fees. But this new space became more than just a financial decision. It was a fresh start, a symbolic declaration. I filled it with plants, of course, but unlike before, I chose them intentionally, resilient varieties that could survive difficult conditions. I bought new furniture with no emotional history, no ties to the past. In the corner, I installed a small home office, not just for work but for security, a locked file cabinet, a shredder, an encrypted hard drive. Not because I thought Amanda would ever do it again, but because now I understood that safety wasn't something to take for granted. Nearly a year into Amanda's sentence, I received another letter from her. It stood out from the rest, not just in content, but in tone. Unlike her previous apologies that centered on her pain, her regret, this one focused entirely on me. "I've been working with a therapist here," she wrote. "She's helped me realize that true accountability isn't about feeling sorry. It's about understanding exactly how your actions harmed someone else. I stole more than your identity, Heather. I stole your sense of safety, your trust in family, your belief that I loved you unconditionally. I can't undo that. But I want you to know that I finally see it. I understand what I destroyed. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking for a response. I just needed you to know that." I didn't reply. Not immediately, not for weeks. But I kept the letter. I reread it when I felt adrift, when the grief resurfaced. It was the first time she had shown me that she truly understood, that maybe, just maybe, something inside her had changed. Around the same time, I made a decision that stunned even me. With a portion of the restitution funds that had finally begun trickling in from the sale of Amanda and Brian's seized assets, I placed a deposit on a small house, a modest, two-bedroom cottage with a generous backyard perfect for the garden I'd always dreamed of. The irony wasn't lost on me. My sister had stolen my name to buy a home. Now, years later, I was using the fallout from her crime to build a home of my own. But this one would truly be mine. The day I signed the legitimate mortgage papers, a milestone that should have been filled solely with joy, I found myself overwhelmed by a tidal wave of emotion. Seated in the loan officer's office, flipping through pages that bore an uncanny resemblance to the forged ones that once derailed my life, I felt a surreal sense of coming full circle. "Is everything all right, Miss Wilson?" the loan officer asked, his tone gentle, as he noticed my pause. I nodded, tears prickling the edges of my vision. "Yes," I replied, pressing my pen to the final document. "Everything is fine. Actually, everything is better than fine." This time, the name I signed was mine, on a loan I had chosen, for a house I could afford. It was mine, through effort and persistence, and more importantly, through integrity. Taking ownership of my new home felt like reclaiming something far greater than property. It was a symbolic act of taking back control, of my name, my future, my narrative. I painted each wall in colors that spoke to me. A calming sage green in the bedroom, a bold navy accent wall in the living room, and soft amber hues in the kitchen that bathed the space in warmth. In the backyard, I planted a vegetable garden with tomatoes, zucchini, and herbs. My friends helped dig and plant, laughing and cheering when we unearthed earthworms like little kids. That garden became a meditation space for me, a symbol of new beginnings, growing things from the soil of loss and betrayal. When the time came for my housewarming, I sent out invitations with no idea who might actually show up. But the people who came were the ones who mattered, colleagues who'd covered my shifts, Krems who had answered late-night phone calls, and Stephanie, who brought champagne and a doormat that read, "Not today, identity thieves." Her dark humor made me laugh, a full, unguarded laugh I hadn't felt in months. Even my parents came. They brought a flowering houseplant and awkward but earnest good wishes. They were trying, in their own imperfect way, to support me while still clinging to their relationship with Amanda. "It's a lovely home, Heather," my mother said, enveloping me in a tight embrace. "We're proud of you," my father added. "Proud that I bought a house?" He shook his head. "Proud of how you've handled all of this, with dignity, with strength." It wasn't complete healing, far from it, but it was something. It was acknowledgement, and in that moment that was enough. 2 weeks after the party, I did something unexpected. I drove to the federal correctional facility where Amanda was serving her sentence. I didn't go inside, I didn't visit her, but I added my name to her visitor list. I wanted the option, the door to a conversation I might someday be ready to have. Healing, I had come to understand, isn't a destination, it's a process. A winding path with days that feel triumphant and others that feel as raw as the first realization of betrayal. I had learned not to fear the setbacks. They were part of the terrain. What happened between Amanda and me is a story without a clean ending. There would be no fairy tale reconciliation, no dramatic courtroom hug. Family bonds broken by betrayal don't mend in tidy lines. They stretch, they scar, and sometimes they reshape into something unfamiliar but still functional. I don't know if Amanda and I will ever share the closeness we once did. I don't know if I'll ever look at her without remembering the pain, but I do know that I've survived something that once seemed unsurvivable. I've rebuilt my life, piece by piece, with care and consciousness and courage I didn't know I had. If there's one truth I carry now, it's this. Trust is not an infinite resource, it is precious. It should be extended cautiously, protected fiercely, and withdrawn unapologetically when necessary. Love and trust, I learned, are not synonymous. I can love my sister, or at least the version of her I once knew, while fully accepting that she may never be someone I can trust again. That is not cruelty, that is self-preservation. This ordeal taught me that family loyalty has its limits, and should. Protecting yourself is not a betrayal, it is a reclamation. Standing up for your boundaries, even when it means going against those you love, is not selfish. It is survival. And forgiveness? If it comes at all, it must be earned. It must follow accountability, not replace it. I've come to believe that real forgiveness has nothing to do with forgetting, and everything to do with choosing how much of the past you allow to shape your future. I am still writing my story. I am still navigating the balance between caution and hope, between memory and possibility. But one thing is certain. I refuse to live as a silent victim. I refuse to shrink so that others can remain comfortable. I refuse to mortgage my future to pay for someone else's mistakes.